You can find the benchmarking section under Analyze, and once in Benchmark, you will see a monthly comparison of a number of similar businesses in your country. So over here, we can see that we're comparing to 250 plus manufacturing peers, and we can see that it's comparing some key activity metrics for my entity, which we can see over here, and those industry entities. You can go and change the industry that you have allocated to your Stripe entity by going to entity settings and by changing it there. And if you're not sure, you can go and watch one of the earlier videos where we talk you through the entity settings. You can view this data in a table, and here we can see each of these metrics, how our entity is doing as compared to those in the market. And we can go and change what we are looking at in this drop down here. So currently we're looking at the entire sector, but we could change this to a broad industry or even a precise industry, and that will reduce the number of peers that we're comparing ourselves to and give us perhaps a more detailed sense. We can also benchmark within our organization. So if we have several franchisees or different locations, we can then go and benchmark with all my entities or with selected entities. Finally, if we click on this drop down, we can change the performance that we're comparing ourselves to. So we're currently comparing ourselves to the middle 50%, but if we're aiming to be the top in the industry, we can go and change this to the top 25%. And if we do that, you'll note that some of the metrics change. So now we are trailing behind in most of the metrics. When we compared ourselves to the middle 50%, there was a lot where we were on par. So it's a good idea perhaps to go and compare yourself to the bottom 25% and make sure that you fix each of those areas that you're trailing and work your way up to the top 25%. But this would really depend on your entity and where you are in the industry at this time. Over here, we get to see whether we are on track, trailing, or ahead. So here we are similar. So we're getting a similar amount of new customers to others in our industry. We have a similar amount of active customers to others in our industry. But we can see that we're trailing in our sales revenue and ahead when it comes to the quantity sold. So we can go and identify areas where we're trailing, things we need to improve on, and we can identify our strengths and see where we're doing well. We can go back and compare ourselves to the top 25, and here we'll see we're trailing when it comes to most things. So we can see that other companies have a much higher average customer spend than we do, and we can go and investigate how we can increase that. Can we sell them add-ons? Is there something else we can do to try and increase that customer spend? Because the top 25% in our industry are achieving that. So that's what we can see in this tabular view. If we go to the graphical view, we can see it as a line graph or a bar chart. And here we can go and select a specific metric, for example, new customers or perhaps sales, and we can see how our entity in this light purple is doing as compared to the sector. And so again, we can get a sense as to how we're tracking. But what's really nice about this graph is it shows us over time. So we can get a sense of seasonality in the industry. So for example, we can see the sector seems to have quite a spike in August, and then it drops down again. And so we can then understand if we are in line with the industry when it comes to seasonality or not. And it seems that we're not in this case, because when the industry had one of its highest months, we had our lowest month. And so this really can give us insights into how well we are performing. We can change the number of periods we're looking at. And again, here we can change what we want to compare ourselves to, whether it's a precise industry and what section of the market, whether it's the top or bottom performing. You can go and change the metrics over here. So we could go look at discounts given and compare ourselves to the industry, which actually seems to be 0 in this case. And we could also go and compare ourselves to something like average products per purchase. And here we'll see we're actually far above them. So perhaps that's one of our strengths. We could also look at this in terms of bar charts. And here we can clearly see our entity versus the sector. And we can quite nicely see the value of each. And so as you can see, our benchmarking tool, whether it's in the tabular format or the graphical format, gives you a really good picture of where your entity is compared to others in your industry. And that can help you identify strengths and weaknesses. And you can use that information to help your business grow. Sift has a very powerful benchmarking tool, and this gives you the ability to see how your business is faring as compared to similar entities in the same industry or other entities that you have on Sift. So how do you find it? Well, it's under Analyze, and then you can see Benchmark, and you have two options, Financial and Activity, and we'll explore both of those in this video. But firstly, how do you get there? So this has already been set up for Jay's Cupcake entity, but let's look at a new entity. So if we were to go look at Atlantica,
We haven't set up benchmarking yet. I'm just going to show you how to do that. So it'll take you to this screen when you go to benchmark. And first it's asking you to classify Atlantica. So Sift doesn't know what industry your business is in until you tell it. So Atlantica is part of our cupcake business. So we're going to call it confectionery. And you'll see we've still got some variety within that. So there's a lot of different industries that your business can be in, and we're going to choose confectionery retailing because we sell cupcakes. Then I click continue, and now it's going to generate a benchmark for this entity Atlantica. So let's let it load. Okay, perfect. So now I have the option to see how my business compares to other businesses on a financial and an activity perspective. So under financial, I can choose the period that I want to look at this for. So you could look at it monthly or annually. I think monthly is quite useful because it's a shorter period, so you can make better, quicker decisions based on it, but you have the option still. You have 3 views, a tabular, a line graph, and a bar chart. So we'll explore the others in a minute, but let's first look at what's in this table. So here you have a lot of profitability metrics. So we've got our total income, our gross profit margin, and a bunch of other things. It also has some liquidity metrics. And then what it does is it tells you what your entity's value is, what the broad industry value is. So most people similar to in businesses similar to yours, how are they performing? It tells you the variance, so the difference between yours and theirs as a percentage, and it gives you this nice graphic as to how your business compares. So if we look at our business, it looks like in terms of total income, we're trailing quite badly behind. Our total income is 82% lower than businesses similar to ours. We see though in gross profit margin, we are much further ahead. We are 82% higher, okay? In operating expense ratio, we're outperforming everyone. So our expenses are far, far lower than the industry. And if we go look here, net assets were ahead, cash we seem to be relatively similar, but when it comes to debtor days, we're underperforming. So this would obviously be different for every entity, but it can help you make some insights and help you change the way you do business. So for example, when I'm seeing that my gross profit margin is much higher and my total income is lower, perhaps my products are overpriced and that might be why I have lower sales. The fact that my expenses are lower, perhaps part of the problem is that I'm not spending enough in my products. I'm not investing in good quality stock or inputs, and that's maybe why I'm not selling as much. And also when it comes to debtors days, the average debtor day is 0 days in the market, and I have 17 days. So I could go to my customers and say, listen, everyone else is making you pay immediately and I'm giving you 17 days to pay. So actually maybe I should be charging interest or be changing my policy there so I can manage that better. So those are just some examples of insights that you can get from this. We're currently looking at a broad industry comparison. So we're comparing to 10 or more specialized food retailing peers. So as a cupcake business, we're quite a niche market, but if you're in a slightly more common market, this will be much bigger. So it tells you how many businesses it's comparing it to, which is helpful because if you're comparing to one other business, it might not be the best benchmark, but the more entities, the better idea you get of the market. We can then go and compare to the sector as a whole. So if I click on sector, it will change how I'm comparing and the entities that it's comparing it to. So here we're comparing to 50 plus retail peers. So remember, I was a retail confectionery company, so the sector would be retail, and here I might actually be performing a little bit better. I'm performing pretty much well on everything, slightly less bad when it comes to debtors days. So it gives you a broader idea, but you can also go to a more concise industry, so you can look for the precise industry. Unfortunately, if you're in a very niche market, it might say something like this, that there's currently not enough confectionery retailing peers, because this is very specific. But if your business is slightly broader, you might be able to compare it to other banks or other shoe shops if there's enough shoe shops on Sift. So if we go back to the broad industry, this is a good middle mark. We can compare to the top 25, the middle 50, or the bottom 50. So let's change to top 25. And now it's going to compare us to the best in our field. So maybe we'll perform a little bit worse in some more areas, but that's really nice because that's maybe where we want to be. We don't want to be in the middle 50. We want to be the best cupcake business. So how do we change our business strategy to meet that? Okay, so there you have everything in the table under financial. You have a similar view under activity. where you also get this tabular format with your entity, the industry, the variances, and this nice visual view as to how you're doing. Here you also can choose industry and where you want to be in your industry. What's really nice with this option is it's more operational data. So it looks at new customers and active customers. So we're really good at getting new customers at Atlantica, but we're pretty much average when it comes to keeping our customers active. You see here our sales are far below, and if we think of this in line with financials and the fact that our gross profit is so high, perhaps we really are pricing our product too high. So we can really make some good insights by looking at these figures, both the activity and the financial. We can also see that our median customer spend is higher, which is a great thing. Our quantity sold is higher, and the average products purchased is higher. So it gives us a picture as to how we're running our business as compared to others and where we should focus. But this is all more operational, which is very useful for managerial accounting because it shows you how your customers are interacting with your business, similar to the customer and product section. But you can check out the help video on that to understand more about that. But things about new and active customers and actual sales and products sold are things that are actually impacting your business, but they're real things that you can have a very easy impact on by just analyzing this and changing the way you run your business. Okay, so we've looked at the table for both. Let's look at the linear graph. It has similar metrics, but it gives it to you in this nice visual graph. So how it works is over here, you can choose the metric that you want to see. So we're currently looking at total income, but we could also look at gross profit margin or any of the others. We can choose the period that we want to look at it for. We can also look at the industry that we want to kind of compare it to, so sector, precise, or broad. And again, we can choose to compare ourselves to the worst, the middle, or hopefully the best. So here we can see how our entity is doing, and that's in this black line over here. And we can also see how the industry is doing. So it looks like the industry is definitely doing a lot better than our division for most parts of the year. And so we need to improve, but at least we're on the upward trend, right? This is also quite useful to see seasonality. It looks like the cupcake entity seems to have a really good period in July, August. Maybe that's when everyone's birthdays are. But this is useful. For example, if you're selling ice creams, probably all businesses are going to go down in winter. And so there's no point being hard on yourself then. But you can see how you're tracking according to seasons and the rest of your industry. Okay, so that's the line graph. And then in terms of the bar chart, we can also see per metric. So we can choose a specific metric and we can see how we're performing. So we've got the entity and the broad industry. So this entity only has data for a few of the months. So here in September we have its metrics, and in December. But obviously a company that's been operating for longer would have a lot more detail. Again, we can go look at activity and we can see the activity per metric. So we can look at new customers, or we could look at average customer spend, and we can see the industry versus our entity. So our entity only seems to really be doing something towards the end, but at least we're moving in the right direction. We started off badly, but we're definitely going in the right direction. And then finally, just the bar chart for activity, similar things. We can see our entity versus the industry and how that's moving. So it's a really useful tool to see how you're comparing to the rest of the people in your industry on a broad perspective and on a slightly closer to home perspective. And also a nice use case for this is if, for example, you created segments for each of the divisions in your business, you could use this to see how they're comparing against each other. So how you do that is you'd create a segment for each entity up here, and then you could compare to all your entities in that same currency. So currently I don't have lots of Great British Pound entities, so it's not going to compare. But if I had created an organization or various organizations with all these different divisions, I could see how they were tracking against each other using that feature. So I hope you guys find this benchmark tool very powerful, and that it helps inform decisions on how you can get up to that top 25% in your industry.